But it's okay, because it's not. People who read it, people who understand about reading will read it and understand its writing, you know.
Yeah, it's also so interesting because, you know, it's a substantial percentage of fiction sales, books written by women, a substantial percentage of readers. I mean, if you look around the room, I would say there's definitely more women here.
Although it has to be said that it was the gentleman who immediately identified all the Osmonds. So
yes.
I presume you're aware, the Osmonds, they had a lot of male fans in Europe in their heyday.
Yes, no, they did, but mainly it was the girls who screamed. And this is a very interesting anthropological fact, was that from the Beatles on, the higher when the Beatles and the other Osmonds went into falsetto, the higher the girls screamed. And David Cassidy's records for Bell Records, the guy who produced them deliberately made his voice much higher.
Yeah.
Because it kind of gets the girls.
It gets that response from the girls. Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
There's an interesting digression in the book, not a digression, but a sort of section in the book where you talk about your male protagonist is a writer and a magazine editor, and he talks about when did it become sort of not cool for men to read fiction? When did men stop loving books, or books stop loving men? Do you really think it's true that men just don't read? What are you finding on your tour and in your world?
Well, a few men have read it and have loved it. You know, I think because it's got a pink cover, I think, you know, it's safe to read. I think it almost should have like "Safe for Men" written on the front. No, I think of my friends, male and female, I think mainly it's the women who buy fiction, really. I mean, there are still some guys who read, but I think that's true, mainly what Bill says. Yeah.
A friend of mine was talking about writing a novel, and he infuriated me. I was about 30 years old, because I said, well, I'll read it, and my book club will read it. And he said, middle-aged women. And A, I was not middle-aged at the time, and B, to dismiss a whole, you know, coterie of readers, I thought.
No, women are keeping books going.
Do it at your own peril. Part of both of your books, there are these sort of dreamy men. Pierce Brosnan is going to play one in the movie, and there's, you know, the editor Bill in this book is quite a dreamy figure. Do you chuckle when you're writing these dream men?
Is Bill a dream man? I don't know. I think he's a bit hopeless, really, isn't he?
Well, you know,
he's not very alpha male, is he, really?
No, but he's kind of sweet and he's great and he gets her and he likes women and he, you know.
Yeah, he likes women. He's my hero. He can't not like women, can he? I don't know. I think coming back to the chick-lit point, I do think that you get marks deducted if you entertain people or if people laugh, because that's obviously bad. I know Tina mentioned that Howard Jacobson's coming, who's a friend of mine, and Howard's just a very, very funny man. If you're around when he's here, he's just so brilliant. You must come and hear him, because he's just such a whirlwind of ideas and fun. But he's always said, because he writes funny books, and he always thought that until he won the Booker that, you know, people think, oh no, not serious. Because people confuse serious and solemn. You can be serious and making people laugh. In fact, when I wrote I Don't Know How She Does It, which I think people think of as making them laugh, but actually I think if you read again, is actually a very tragic book about a woman who's in a very bad place. And I wrote it at the speed of a comedy, but I felt it was really quite distressing, the material. And several people said to me, why didn't you write I Don't Know How She Does It as a factual book about women's lives? And I said, if I'd written a factual book about women's lives and called Ladies, Your Life Stinks, it would have sold 3 copies. But I Don't Know How She Does It sold almost 4 million copies around the world and continues to sell to this day. So I think laughing people into recognition about universal truths is one of my favorite things to do. Because I think laughter is very powerful. You know, I think you're always slightly on the cusp of tears with that kind of laughter, aren't you? And there are moments in here where I think people will laugh, and then there'll be a little bit of a jab at the end of the laugh, which is that it's sad, you know.
Now, I want to ask you, and you know, if you don't want to talk about this, we can definitely move on. But you know, your books are threaded through with this melancholy, and they're also very personal and very confessional. And in your life as a columnist, you recently wrote about suffering from depression, and I know it caused a gigantic stir in London and England, and I don't know how widely read it was here, but there is something to that, you know, being able to see the light and the dark. And how did you decide that you were going to go all the way and make yourself your subject? I mean, I know as a columnist you have to do that, but how do you decide how confessional to be and how honest to be?
You mean in my columns?
In your columns and in your writing in novels, but especially with something like revealing that you've been suffering from depression or had suffered from it?
Well, I think that, just to say quickly, the novels are not, I mean, people think it's you. It's, of course, it's not me. It's not, these people are not me. They have some of my experiences, but everything, you know. Anyway, that's a different story. There's a huge amount of other experience bound into it. I don't know, I think I'd written a column for a long time, and I think that you have this sort of buoyant column persona, which you keep going, and it was getting further and further away from the truth about how I was. And I decided to give up the column. In fact, I was advised to, I went to see a psychiatrist, and it was very funny, and she said, well, unintentionally, here we go again, you see, black comedy and everything. So she said that she wanted me to remove the sources of stress from my life. I said it would be easier to remove the sources of life from my stress, because it would be a lot quicker. And no, I decided, I think you decide how much to share with your readers, and I felt it would be honest to say this is how I'd been feeling, because I think it's extremely common, particularly among women of my age, extremely common. The only thing about the column that I wrote about depression, or I was talking about the fact that in the book, in I Think I Love You, Petra's rather obsessed with those questionnaires that you fill in girls' magazines, which say, you know, are you A, B, C, or D? Do you have this kind of hair? Or I want to be popular. Are you A, B, or C, D? And when I went to this therapist waiting room, she made me fill in a questionnaire about depression, but it just brought back all those A, B, C, or D, and I was trying to figure out which one would make me most sane of all these options, you know. And
which one will get me the, you know, Ativan, but won't get me locked up?
It was really trying to figure out the kind of what you know, have you lost all will to live, or have you lost some of the will to live, or are you deeply unhappy? It was just, you know, it was somehow awful, but terrible. And the piece I wrote, really, I wrote it when I'd come through the apps, you know, when the beast was no longer at my throat, because you can't write a piece like that. It was a piece of writing. It was a calculated piece of writing, explaining, hopefully in a slightly entertaining way, what it felt like to be like. So, of course, the only element of untruth in it was that I was through some of it by then, because I couldn't have written that piece.
When you're in the middle of it. No.
So there was a slight element of sleight of hand, I guess.
Can you elaborate on the reaction a little bit? Did it surprise you? Did people come out of the woodwork and say, me too, or?
You know, I tried to avoid most of the reaction. I mean, you know, in England, there's still something of a stiff upper lip, so I think, you know, there's a sort of stigma to mental illness. I just think ridiculous, you know, it's, you know, it's just, it's an illness, and there's medicine for it. A therapist I was seeing said that after the article that lots of people at a conference reported enormous numbers of people coming forward citing the article, which said, it was almost like, well, if she's felt like that, then it's okay to say I feel like that too. And I do think actually there was this other irony, which is that, because I'd written I Don't Know How She Does It, which was about, you know, woman Kate who's going mad, juggling work and home. And I think at some level I thought, oh, you've written the novel, you've inoculated, you know, you've had the jab against the disease it describes. You're fine because you wrote it. And of course that wasn't right. So that was complacent. But yeah, I think maybe if I look back at that book now, do you think you look back at the book that she's going a bit mad?
I think it is threaded through with a kind of sadness where she talks about things that are letting her down and people that are letting her down and things that weren't the way she expected them to be. And there is this kind of sensation that you get as a woman today, and I'm sure men feel it too, but they don't write novels about it because men don't read novels about that, of kind of running on the conveyor belt that's going in the opposite direction, and you're just kind of running against the wind. And I think after a while that does kind of wear you out.
Yes.
And I think that's the part that people don't want to admit to, because as the superwoman, you have to be able to do everything. And if you admit that you're worn out, you know, then you're sort of, you already feel like you're failing at everything.
One of the best parts, the things I enjoy about being a writer is that then people come forward with their own stories, and I absolutely love the kind of sharing of joint experience, because I think it's one of the best things about being human, really. It's very wonderful to share.